I, Kaylee, 28 years old, never thought I would collapse in the middle of our marketing agency's open floor plan. After working 72 hours straight on the Henderson campaign, my vision blurred, my legs gave out, and everything went black. I woke up in the hospital to discover the doctors had called my emergency contacts, my parents, multiple times. They lived just 30 minutes away but never showed up. Instead, my sister Amber had driven 6 hours across state lines to be by my bedside. What I didn't know then was that this betrayal was just the beginning of uncovering the truth about my family. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt let down by the people who were supposed to care the most. Trust me, what happened next will show you exactly how I turned this painful betrayal into the freedom I never knew I needed. Growing up in our picture-perfect colonial home in suburban Connecticut, my childhood looked idyllic from the outside. My father, Richard, a successful investment banker, and my mother, Diana, who chaired every important charity committee in our town, created an image of the perfect family. But behind our glossy Christmas cards and carefully orchestrated family vacations was a household where love was always conditional. From my earliest memories, I understood that my parents' approval depended entirely on what I achieved. When I brought home an A- on a math test in 3rd grade, my father didn't congratulate me, he asked why it wasn't an A+. When I won 2nd place in the regional spelling bee at 11, my mother's first comment was, "Well, I suppose 2nd is better than nothing." My childhood bedroom shelves groaned under trophies and certificates, each one an attempt to earn a moment of genuine pride from my parents. My sister Amber, 4 years older, approached our family dynamics differently. While I became the perfect daughter, studious, obedient, achievement-oriented, Amber questioned everything. She challenged our parents' priorities, refused to participate in the social events our mother deemed essential, and eventually became labeled the problem child. "They don't love us, Kaylee," Amber told me bluntly the night before she left for college. "They love what we represent to other people." I dismissed her words then, convinced that if I just worked harder, achieved more, I would finally earn the warmth I craved. When Amber moved out permanently at 18 after a massive fight with our parents about her disappointing choice of a state university instead of the Ivy League, our already limited relationship became even more distant. For years, we only saw each other at mandatory holiday gatherings, where Amber would arrive late, leave early, and spend most of her time avoiding our parents. Meanwhile, I followed the path laid out for me: prestigious private university, magna cum laude, and a high-pressure job at one of New York's top marketing agencies. Every achievement became another attempt to fill the emotional void my parents had created. I called them weekly with updates on my career progress. I visited monthly, sitting through lunches where my mother critiqued everything from my appearance to my apartment location. I sent thoughtful gifts for every occasion, which were acknowledged with perfunctory thank you texts. As I approached my late 20s, Amber and I began rebuilding our relationship. It started with occasional texts, then phone calls that lasted longer each time. I visited her in Philadelphia one weekend, and for the first time in years, I felt the freedom to be myself without constant evaluation. Amber had built a life completely separate from our parents' influence. A modest but happy existence with genuine friends and a job she found meaningful as an art therapist for troubled teens. "You're killing yourself for people who will never be satisfied," she observed after I spent half our dinner answering urgent work emails. "When's the last time you did something just because it made you happy?" I couldn't answer her question. The truth was, I didn't know what made me happy anymore. My entire identity had become wrapped up in achievements that might finally make my parents proud. The weeks before my collapse had been particularly grueling. Our agency had landed the Henderson account, a major pharmaceutical company that could put our boutique firm on the map. As the lead strategist, I bore the brunt of the pressure. I started arriving at 6 a.m. and leaving after midnight. I skipped meals, subsisted on coffee and energy drinks, and ignored the increasingly concerning physical symptoms: the migraines, the heart palpitations, the dizzy spells. My body had been sending warning signals for weeks. The morning of my collapse, I'd woken up with my heart racing so fast I had to sit on the edge of my bed for 10 minutes before I could stand. I ignored it, took 2 extra-strength painkillers for my pounding headache, and headed to the office anyway. We had a client presentation the next day, and everything had to be perfect. My parents knew about the Henderson campaign. In fact, my father had connections on their board and had subtly implied that my performance would reflect on him. "Don't disappoint them, Kaylee," he said during our last phone call. "You know how important these relationships are for everyone." The subtext was clear. My success wasn't just for me, it was for the family image. Looking back, I can see how perfectly I'd been conditioned. Every choice I made was filtered through the lens of what would make Richard and Diana proud. Every moment of my life was dedicated to proving I was worthy of the love they never quite gave. And Amber, the sister I'd once viewed as the family rebel, was the only one who had escaped the cycle of emotional manipulation that defined our family. Neither of us could have predicted that my physical collapse would trigger the emotional one that would finally free me from our parents' control, or that the sister I'd grown apart from would become my strongest ally in rebuilding my life on my own terms. The harsh fluorescent lighting was the first thing I noticed when I regained consciousness. The second was the 4 needle taped to my arm, feeding clear liquid into my veins. A steady beeping sound filled the room, and the antiseptic smell immediately identified my location before my brain fully processed it. Hospital. "She's awake," a nurse said, moving quickly to my bedside. "Kaylee? Can you hear me? You're at Mount Sinai Hospital." My throat felt like sandpaper. "What happened?" I managed to croak out. "You collapsed at your workplace," she explained, checking my vitals with efficient movements. "Your coworkers called 911. You've been unconscious for about 3 hours." The events came flooding back, the presentation prep, the room spinning, the concerned faces of my colleagues as my knees buckled beneath me. Embarrassment washed over me, quickly followed by panic about the unfinished work. My laptop, the Henderson presentation, I tried to sit up, but was immediately hit with a wave of dizziness. "Stay down," the nurse instructed firmly. "Dr. Patel will be in shortly to discuss your condition." Dr. Patel, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, arrived moments later with a chart in hand. "Ms. Wilson, you're suffering from severe exhaustion and dehydration," she said after examining me. "Your electrolytes are dangerously imbalanced, and you're showing early signs of kidney stress. Your colleagues mentioned you've been working extremely long hours with little rest or proper nutrition. Is that correct?" I nodded reluctantly. "This isn't just about being tired," she continued, her voice stern but compassionate. "You're on the verge of doing permanent damage to your body. Your heart showed some concerning rhythm irregularities when you were brought in. If you continue this way, we could be looking at serious long-term health consequences." The gravity of her words was just sinking in when the door burst open. Amber stood there, hair disheveled, still wearing wrinkled pajama pants under her coat, eyes wild with concern. "Kaylee," she exclaimed, rushing to my bedside. "Thank God you're awake. I got here as fast as I could." "Amber?" I was genuinely confused. "How did you even know I was here?" "Your coworker Jordan found my number in your phone. She called me about 4 hours ago, and I left immediately." She pushed my hair back from my forehead in a gesture so tender it made my eyes water. "I drove like a maniac from Philly." The realization hit me slowly. "You drove 6 hours to get here." "Of course I did. You're my sister." She said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. As the initial shock of seeing Amber subsided, another question formed. "Have Mom and Dad been here?" A shadow crossed Amber's face. She exchanged a look with the nurse, who suddenly seemed very interested in adjusting my Ford drip. "We tried calling your emergency contacts when you were brought in," the nurse said carefully. "Multiple times. They didn't answer." I asked, though something in their expressions told me the truth was worse. "They answered," Amber said flatly. "They just didn't come." I felt like I'd been slapped. That can't be right. They only live in Greenwich. That's barely half an hour away. Amber pulled out her phone. "Check your messages." With shaking hands, I took her phone. There was a text conversation with our mother from 3 hours earlier. "Amber, Mom, Kaylee's in the hospital. She collapsed at work. They've called you several times. Why aren't you there? Mom, we're aware of the situation. We have the charity gala tonight. I'm sure it's just exhaustion. She works too hard. We'll visit tomorrow. Amber, are you serious? Your daughter is in the hospital. Mom, don't be dramatic, Amber. The hospital would have told us if it was life-threatening. The Andersons are being honored tonight, and your father is presenting the award. We can't cancel. I stared at the phone, reading and rereading the conversation, trying to make sense of it. My parents had chosen a charity gala over coming to see me in the hospital. There's more, Amber said quietly, taking the phone back and scrolling to another screen. It was our mother's Instagram account, showing a post from just an hour ago. My parents smiling broadly at their table at the gala, champagne glasses raised in a toast. The caption read, "Proud to support the Children's Health Initiative tonight with so many wonderful friends. #blessed #giving back." The irony was almost too much to bear, publicly supporting children's health while ignoring their own daughter in the hospital. Maybe they just didn't understand how serious it was, I said weakly, still trying to make excuses for them. The nurse, who had been silent during this exchange, cleared her throat. "I spoke with your mother myself," she said. "I explained your condition in detail and emphasized that we recommended family be present." She said, and I quote, "Kaylee has always been prone to dramatics. Just keep her overnight for observation if needed." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Even now, lying in a hospital bed with medical equipment monitoring my vital signs, my mother had dismissed my health crisis as dramatics. "I need to see my phone," I said. Amber hesitated. "Kaylee, you need to rest. The texts will just upset you more. I need to see for myself." She reluctantly handed me my phone from my belongings bag. There were dozens of missed calls and messages from concerned coworkers. There was a brief text from my father sent 2 hours after I was admitted. "Your mother says you're in the hospital. Take whatever time you need to recover, but please keep Jordan updated on the Henderson presentation status." Not a word of concern about my condition. Not a question about how I was feeling. Just a reminder about work obligations. Dr. Patel returned as I was still processing this revelation. "We'd like to keep you overnight for observation and fluids," she said. "Your body needs rest, real rest, to recover." "I'll stay with her," Amber said immediately. "Are you family?" Dr. Patel asked. "I'm her sister." "Good. She shouldn't be alone right now." The doctor turned to me. "MS. Wilson, when you're discharged, you'll need at least a week of rest before returning to work. I'll provide a note for your employer." After the doctor left, Amber pulled a chair close to my bed. "You're coming home with me tomorrow," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I already talked to Jordan. She's handling the Henderson situation, and your boss agreed you need medical leave." "I can't just leave everything," I began. "Yes, you can," Amber interrupted. "And you will. Because if you don't, next time you might not wake up in a hospital. You might not wake up at all." As the reality of both my physical condition and my parents' response sank in, I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "They really don't care, do they?" I whispered. Amber took my hand. "They care about what you represent, about what you achieve. They don't care about you, Kaylee. Not the real you." She squeezed my fingers. "But I do. And it's time you started caring about yourself too." That night in the hospital, with my sister sleeping uncomfortably in the chair beside my bed while my parents attended a gala barely 30 minutes away, something fundamental shifted inside me. The carefully constructed justifications I'd built around my parents' behavior began to crumble. And in their place, a painful but necessary truth took root. The love and approval I'd spent my entire life chasing had never been available to me in the first place. Amber's apartment in Philadelphia was nothing like the sleek, minimalist space I'd created in New York. Her walls were covered with colorful artwork, some her own, some created by her teenage clients. Mismatched furniture that prioritized comfort over style filled the living room. Plants thrived on every windowsill. It wasn't perfectly curated or designed to impress, but it felt more like a home than any place I'd lived since childhood. "It's not much," Amber said as she helped me settle onto her couch, but the guest room has good light, and the building's quiet. It's perfect, I said, and meant it. After the sterile hospital room and my own apartment that sometimes felt more like a hotel suite than a home, the lived-in warmth of Amber's place was exactly what I needed. Dr. Patel had prescribed 3 weeks of medical leave, with strict instructions to prioritize rest, proper nutrition, and stress reduction. No checking work emails. No conference calls. No, just finishing up one little project. My body had delivered a warning, and if I didn't heed it, the next crisis might be far worse. For the first few days, I mostly slept. My body was making up for months, maybe years, of accumulated sleep debt. Amber worked from home when she could, quietly sketching at her dining table while I dozed on the couch, or preparing simple, nutritious meals that we ate together when I was awake. On the 4th day, as I was finally starting to feel human again, my phone rang with my mother's ringtone. I glanced at Amber, who gave me a look that clearly said, "You don't have to answer," but I picked up anyway. "Kaylee, darling," my mother's voice was bright and artificial. "How are you feeling? Ready to get back to work soon?" "No, I'm sorry we didn't come to the hospital." No acknowledgement of their absence. "The doctor ordered 3 weeks of medical leave," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm staying with Amber until I'm cleared to return." "With Amber?" My mother's tone shifted to disapproving. "Wouldn't you be more comfortable at home? Your old room is always available." The thought of recovering in my childhood bedroom, under my parents' scrutiny, made my chest tighten. "I'm fine here." "Well, your father is concerned about the Henderson account. He ran into Philip Henderson at the club yesterday, and it was rather awkward explaining why you've suddenly disappeared from the project." "No concern for my health, just worry about social awkwardness at the country club." "I didn't disappear," I said, feeling a spark of anger. "I collapsed and was hospitalized. Jordan is handling everything." "Yes, well," my mother sniffed. "These things happen when you don't take proper care of yourself. Your father always says you push yourself too hard. You get that from my side of the family, I'm afraid." The conversation continued in this vein for another few minutes, subtle criticisms disguised as concern, questions about work thinly veiled as interest in my well-being. When I finally hung up, Amber was watching me with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. "They're unbelievable," she said. "They're just concerned in their own way," I replied automatically, the defensive response ingrained after years of making excuses for them. Amber raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Later, after everyone had gone home except Amber, we sat on my balcony with cups of tea, watching the lights of the Brooklyn skyline. "I've been thinking about starting a support group," I said, "for adults from emotionally manipulative families. There must be others out there struggling with the same issues we faced." "That's a great idea," Amber replied. "Using your experience to help others, that's the ultimate revenge, isn't it? Taking something that was meant to control you and transforming it into something that empowers other people." She was right. The most powerful response to our parents' manipulation wasn't anger or bitterness, but growth, creating something positive from the painful experiences, helping others find their way to freedom as we had done. I had received an email from my father 2 days earlier, the first communication in weeks that didn't attempt to manipulate or control. It had been brief but notable. "Your mother and I have started seeing a family therapist. We're trying to understand where things went wrong. I'm not asking for anything from you. Just wanted you to know." I hadn't responded yet, unsure what to make of this apparent step toward self-reflection. Was it genuine or another strategy to regain access to my life? Time would tell. Either way, my well-being no longer depended on their growth or approval. The journey toward healing wasn't linear. Some days I still caught myself slipping into old patterns, seeking validation through achievement, ignoring my needs to please others, measuring my worth by external metrics. But now I recognized these patterns when they emerged and had tools to redirect them. I was building a life based on my own values rather than inherited expectations, a life with room for creativity, authentic connections, and joy that didn't depend on performance. The road ahead might not be perfectly clear, but for the first time, it was truly mine to navigate. "Hey," I said, turning to my sister. "I never properly thanked you." for driving 6 hours to the hospital that day, for showing me the truth about our family, for everything. Amber smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. That's what real family does, Kaylee. Not the kind that shows up for the photo ops, but the kind that shows up when you're falling apart. No thanks needed. As we sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, I felt profound gratitude for the collapse that had initiated my awakening. Sometimes the most painful moments become the most transformative if we're brave enough to learn from them and strong enough to make changes based on those lessons. My story wasn't about revenge in the end. It was about reclamation of my health, my autonomy, my authentic self. The greatest power we have against those who try to control us isn't retaliation, but liberation, freeing ourselves from the need for their approval and writing our own stories on our own terms. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't see the real you? Have you struggled to break free from others' expectations to find your authentic path? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your life and happiness. Thank you for being part of my journey, and remember, the family that truly matters is often the one we create for ourselves, bound not by blood, but by genuine love and respect. That afternoon, Jordan called with an update on the Henderson campaign. After assuring me everything was under control and urging me to focus on recovery, she hesitated. There's something else you should know, she said. Your father called Gary yesterday. Gary was our agency's founder and CEO, my boss. My father called my boss? Why? He said he was concerned about how your health situation might impact the Henderson timeline. He mentioned something about his connections with their board. A cold feeling spread through my chest. What exactly did he say? Jordan sounded uncomfortable. I only heard Gary's side of the conversation, but... Kaylee, I think your father implied that your collapse was due to emotional instability rather than overwork. Gary defended you, of course. He told your father that you're the most stable, reliable person on the team and that you'd worked yourself to exhaustion because of your dedication. I felt like I'd been punched. My own father had undermined me professionally under the guise of concern. Had he been worried about me? Or concerned that my failure might reflect poorly on him with his business connections? After hanging up with Jordan, I sat in stunned silence. Amber didn't push, just quietly made tea and waited for me to process. My father called my boss, I finally said. He suggested I was emotionally unstable. Amber's expression darkened. Classic Richard. He's rewriting the narrative to protect himself. Protect himself from what? I'm the one who collapsed. Exactly. Their perfect daughter publicly failed to be perfect. That reflects on them on the image they've carefully constructed. So they're creating a different story, one where you're inherently flawed rather than pushed beyond human limits. The realization hit hard because it rang true. My parents had always been masters at revising reality to maintain their perfect facade. Over the next few days, Amber and I fell into a comfortable routine. She worked while I rested, and in the evenings, we really talked for the first time in years. I learned about her art therapy work, her brief engagement that had ended the previous year, her close circle of friends who sounded more like family than our actual relatives. And I shared, too, my growing disillusionment with the cutthroat marketing world, the emptiness I felt despite my professional success, the gnawing feeling that I was living someone else's idea of a good life rather than creating my own. One evening, as we sorted through some old boxes Amber had brought from storage for a project, we found my childhood diary, a small pink book with a flimsy lock that had long since broken. On a whim, we opened it. Dear Diary, I read aloud from an entry dated when I was 11. I got the highest math score in the class today. Mom said that's what's expected and took away my TV time because I forgot to put my shoes on the rack. I wish I could make her really proud just once. Entry after entry documented small rejections, conditional praise, and a child's desperate attempts to earn her parents' love. Reading it as an adult was heartbreaking. You should see this, Amber said, pulling out her laptop. She opened a folder of scanned documents and pulled up an old bank statement from our parents' accounts that she'd found years ago when looking for her birth certificate. What am I looking at? I asked, scanning the numbers. This is from the year you started college, Amber explained. See this withdrawal? And this one? They match the loans Mom and Dad gave you for your first semester expenses before your scholarship kicked in. I nodded, remembering how grateful I'd been for their help and how diligently I'd repaid them with my first post-college paychecks. Now look at this, Amber said, opening another document. This is a statement from your college fund, the one Grandma set up for you when you were born. The dates of these withdrawals match exactly. I stared at the screen, the implications slowly sinking in. They took money from my college fund and pretended it was a loan from them. Money that was already mine. And then let you pay them back, Amber confirmed grimly. With interest. How did you get these? I asked, still processing this revelation. After I left home, I made it my business to understand exactly who our parents really are, Amber said quietly. I needed to know I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did about them. Once I started looking, the evidence was everywhere. She showed me more documents, emails, financial records, old letters, building a picture of calculated manipulation spanning decades. Our parents had borrowed from my trust fund multiple times without ever disclosing it, had taken credit for financial help that had actually come from our grandmother, had systematically isolated both of us from extended family members who might have offered different perspectives. Why didn't you tell me all this years ago? I asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. Amber's expression was sad. Would you have believed me? You were still deep in it, Kaylee. You needed to see it for yourself. She was right. Until my collapse forced me to confront reality, I had been willfully blind to the truth about our family dynamics. I had needed to be the good daughter, the successful one, the one who made them proud. I'd built my entire identity around earning love that had always been conditional. What do I do now? I whispered, feeling adrift. My entire life had been oriented around pleasing my parents. Without that driving force, who was I supposed to be? Now, Amber said, taking my hand, you figure out what you want. Not what will make Richard and Diana proud. Not what looks impressive at their country club. What will make you, Kaylee Wilson, happy? It sounded so simple when she said it like that. Yet the prospect was terrifying. I'd never made a major life decision without calculating how it would affect my parents' approval. The thought of charting my own course, based solely on my own desires, was both exhilarating and deeply frightening. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the windowsill in Amber's guest room, looking out at the Philadelphia skyline, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my anger. Anger at my parents for their manipulation and conditional love. Anger at myself for being complicit in my own unhappiness for so long. And beneath the anger, something else was taking root, determination. I would not continue living my life to please people who saw me as an extension of themselves rather than as an individual with my own needs and desires. Somehow, I would find the courage to break free. 3 weeks after my collapse, I returned to my apartment in New York. The space felt different somehow, colder and more impersonal than I remembered. Had it always been this sterile, with its grayscale color scheme and minimal decor? Or had my time in Amber's vibrant, lived-in apartment shifted my perception? I ran my fingers over the pristine kitchen counter, realizing I'd rarely cooked here. The shelves held design books and industry awards, but few personal mementos. It was less a home than a showcase, another achievement to display, like the degrees and certificates carefully framed on my office wall. My return to the agency was both easier and harder than I'd anticipated. Easier because my colleagues welcomed me with genuine warmth. Jordan had organized a low-key breakfast gathering with my favorite pastries, and several team members had left handwritten notes on my desk. Harder because I found myself viewing the relentless pace and pressure with new eyes. Had the constant stress and 80-hour weeks ever really been worth it? Gary, my boss, called me into his office mid-morning. It's good to have you back, Kaylee, he said, gesturing for me to sit. How are you feeling? Much better, I replied. The break was exactly what I needed. Good. He hesitated, clearly choosing his next words carefully. I want you to know that your health comes first. We've restructured some of the account responsibilities while you were away. Jordan will continue as lead on Henderson, and we'd like you to focus on the Westbrook campaign for now. It's a smaller client, but still strategic. I felt a flicker of alarm. Has my performance been unsatisfactory? Not at all, Gary assured me. You're one of our strongest strategists. But after speaking with your doctor, and, frankly, after that concerning call from your father, I think it's best if we ease you back in. There it was again, my father's interference affecting my professional standing. I took a deep breath. What exactly did my father say to you? Gary looked uncomfortable. He expressed concern about your workload, which I appreciated. But he also suggested that your episode might have been related to emotional issues rather than simply overwork. He mentioned something about a family history. The anger I'd been cultivating during my recovery flared hot. There is no family history of emotional issues, I said, keeping my voice steady with effort. I collapsed because I worked 72 hours straight on the Henderson pitch. My doctor diagnosed severe exhaustion and dehydration, nothing more. That's what I figured, Gary nodded. Look, I've known you for 4 years. You're the most level-headed person on the team. I told your father as much. I appreciate that, I said, genuinely grateful for his support. And I understand scaling back my responsibilities for now, but I want to be clear that I'm fully capable of handling major accounts. Of course. This is temporary, just until you're back at full strength. I left Gary's office with mixed emotions. I was frustrated by my demotion, however temporary, but also felt a strange sense of relief. The Westbrook campaign would require maybe 50 hours a week instead of 80. Perhaps this forced step back was actually an opportunity to recalibrate my relationship with work. That evening, just as I was settling in with takeout and the first non-work-related book I'd picked up in months, my doorbell rang. When I checked the peephole, my stomach dropped. My parents stood in the hallway, my mother clutching a gift bag, my father checking his watch impatiently. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home. But they would just come back another time. Better to face them now, when I was prepared. Kaylee, darling. My mother air-kissed both my cheeks as she swept in, surveying my apartment with her usual barely concealed disapproval. We thought we'd surprise you on your first day back. How are you feeling? I'm fine, I said, not moving to hug either of them. What brings you to the city? We can't visit our daughter without a reason, my father asked, though he was already checking his phone for messages. We brought soup, my mother announced, pulling a container from the gift bag. Homemade by Elsa. Elsa was their housekeeper, who had shown me more genuine affection during my childhood than either of my parents. Thank you, I said, taking the container. Would you like to sit down? We moved to my living room, the conversation stilted and artificial. My mother commented on my worrying weight loss. My father inquired about the Henderson account, frowning when I explained I'd been reassigned. Temporary setbacks happen, he said, in the same tone he'd used when I didn't make valedictorian despite having the highest GPA. The school had chosen the student body president instead. I'm sure Gary understands the situation. What situation would that be? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. My parents exchanged a look. Your health situation, of course, my mother said smoothly. You mean when I collapsed from exhaustion after working 3 days straight? The exhaustion that sent me to the hospital, where you couldn't be bothered to visit me. The direct confrontation, so unlike my usual careful deference, clearly startled them. We've been over this, my father said dismissively. We had prior commitments that couldn't be changed. We knew you were in good hands. You chose a charity gala over your hospitalized daughter. Now, Kaylee, my mother's voice took on the patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. You're clearly still not yourself. This emotional response proves what your father told Gary. You're dealing with more than simple exhaustion. I felt like I'd been slapped. What exactly did you tell my boss, Dad? My father straightened, switching to his authoritative business persona. I simply expressed concern that your collapse might indicate underlying emotional instability. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Mental health issues are quite common these days. Mental health issues? I repeated incredulously. I don't have mental health issues. I have parents who value appearances over their daughter's well-being. Parents who call my boss to undermine me professionally rather than support me during a health crisis. That's enough, my father snapped. This is exactly the kind of irrational behavior I'm talking about. You've always been high-strung, Kaylee. Always seeking approval, always pushing yourself too hard. The irony of him identifying the very traits they had instilled in me was almost too much to bear. "We think you should consider moving back home for a while," my mother interjected, her voice gentle but firm. "Somewhere we can keep an eye on you." "Keep an eye on me?" I echoed. "I'm 28 years old. I don't need supervision." "Clearly you do," my father countered. "Your sister has always been a bad influence. 3 weeks with her, and you come back questioning everything, lashing out at the people who love you most." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Love me? When have either of you ever shown that you love me for who I am rather than what I achieve?" "We've given you everything," my mother said, genuine confusion in her voice. "The best schools, opportunities, connections. How can you question our love?" In that moment, I saw with painful clarity that my parents truly didn't understand the difference between providing material advantages and offering emotional support. In their worldview, success and status were the ultimate expressions of love. "I need you to leave," I said quietly. "Don't be ridiculous," my father began, but I cut him off. "I need you to leave," I repeated more firmly. "I'm tired, and this conversation isn't productive." My mother stood, smoothing her immaculate slacks. "We'll talk when you're feeling more yourself," she said, as if I were a child having a tantrum. "Oh, and I noticed you've rearranged some things since we were here last. The blue vase looks better on the entry table than the bookshelf." I froze. "When were you here last?" My parents exchanged another look, this one slightly guilty. "You were in our apartment while I was at Amber's?" The violation of privacy left me breathless. "We have a key for emergencies," my father said defensively. "We wanted to make sure everything was in order before you returned. You had no right to enter my home without permission." "Don't be dramatic, Kaylee," my mother sighed. "We're your parents." We were concerned. Concerned enough to snoop through my apartment, but not concerned enough to visit me in the hospital, I summarized flatly. "Please give me your key before you leave." My father's face hardened. "I think we'll hold on to it, given your current state." "Then I'll change the locks tomorrow." "This is exactly why we're worried," my mother said. "This paranoia, these accusations. We think you should consider family therapy. Dr. Winters has an opening next month. He's known our family for years." Dr. Winters, my parents' golf buddy, who had been our family physician throughout my childhood. The same doctor who had dismissed my teenage anxiety as academic perfectionism and prescribed nothing but relaxation techniques. "If I decide to see a therapist, it will be someone of my choosing," I said. "Now please leave." My father's face darkened with anger. "Think carefully about your tone, Kaylee. We've supported you in countless ways. The car we co-signed for. The connections that got you the interview at your agency. Actions have consequences." The threat was thinly veiled. "Fall back in line, or we'll withdraw our support." For a moment, the old fear gripped me, the terror of disappointing them, of losing their approval. Then I remembered the bank statements Amber had shown me, the revelation that their loans had been my own money all along. "Yes," I agreed calmly. "Actions do have consequences. Please leave now." After they finally departed, my mother promising to call tomorrow when I was more reasonable, my father still scowling, I sank onto my couch, shaking with adrenaline. I'd never stood up to them like that before. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I called Amber immediately. "They showed up at my apartment," I said when she answered. "And apparently they've been here before, while I was staying with you. They have a key." "Change your locks," Amber said without hesitation. "And don't tell them your new address when your lease is up." "They threatened to withdraw their support," I continued. "The car they co-signed for, Dad's business connections. Are you surprised? Control is their love language. The moment you assert independence, they pull out the big guns." She was right, of course. Every gift, every opportunity my parents had provided came with invisible strings attached. "I need a plan," I said, thinking aloud. "I need to become completely independent from them. Financially, professionally, emotionally." "That's the first healthy decision I've heard you make in years," Amber replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "So where do we start?" We spent the next hour outlining concrete steps, refinancing my car to remove their names, saving an emergency fund, building my own professional network separate from my father's connections. It wouldn't be easy or quick, but for the first time, I saw a path forward that didn't depend on my parents' approval. What I couldn't have known then was that fate was about to hand me an unexpected tool for my independence and force a confrontation that would change our family dynamic forever. A week after my parents' unexpected visit, I received a letter with a return address from Caldwell and Associates, a law firm I didn't recognize. My first thought was that my parents had escalated their threats, perhaps consulting a lawyer about the car they'd co-signed for, or some other leverage they thought they held over me. I opened the envelope with trepidation, only to find a formal letter addressing me as the granddaughter of Eleanor Wilson. My grandmother had passed away 4 months earlier, a loss that still felt raw. We'd been close throughout my childhood, her home a sanctuary from my parents' constant pressure. After her death, I'd received a few personal mementos, but my parents had handled all the estate matters, informing me that Grandma's modest assets had been divided among various family members and charities. The letter from Caldwell and Associates told a different story. Dear Ms. Wilson, as the executor of Eleanor Wilson's estate, I must inform you that despite multiple attempts to contact you directly over the past 4 months, we have been unable to reach you regarding your inheritance. Your parents, Richard and Diana Wilson, assured us they would relay the information to you, but as we have not received the required documentation for the transfer of assets, I am writing to you directly. Under the terms of your grandmother's will, you are the beneficiary of a trust valued at approximately $250,000. These funds were specifically designated for you, with the stipulation that they be transferred directly to your control upon her passing. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to begin the process of transferring these assets to your name. Sincerely, Thomas Caldwell, ESQ. I read the letter 3 times, struggling to process its implications. My grandmother had left me a significant inheritance, and my parents had deliberately kept this information from me. For 4 months, they had intercepted communications from the lawyer and hidden the existence of this inheritance. With shaking hands, I called the number on the letterhead. Caldwell and Associates, a receptionist answered. This is Kaylee Wilson, I said. I received a letter about my grandmother Eleanor Wilson's estate. I need to speak with Thomas Caldwell. After a brief hold, a man with a deep, authoritative voice came on the line. Ms. Wilson, thank you for calling. I was beginning to worry we wouldn't reach you. I just received your letter, I explained. This is the first I'm hearing about any inheritance. There was a pause. I see, he said carefully. That's concerning. I've been sending correspondence to your address for 4 months. When I received no response, I contacted your parents, who assured me they were discussing the matter with you. They never mentioned it, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. Not once. I'm sorry to hear that, he replied, his tone suggesting this wasn't entirely surprising. Your grandmother was quite specific about her wishes. She wanted you to have direct control of these assets, without interference from third parties. Including my parents? Especially your parents, Caldwell confirmed. Eleanor made her intentions quite clear during our estate planning meetings. We arranged an appointment for the following day, and I hung up feeling both shocked and vindicated. My grandmother, quiet, observant Eleanor, had seen the truth about my parents long before I had been ready to acknowledge it. The next morning, in Caldwell's wood-paneled office overlooking Bryant Park, the full picture emerged. My grandmother had established a trust specifically for me years ago, adding to it gradually. She had left similar amounts to Amber and to several charities, but nothing directly to my parents. There's something else you should know, Caldwell said, sliding a sealed envelope across his desk. Eleanor left this letter for you, with instructions that it be delivered along with the inheritance documentation. The envelope bore my name in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. I opened it carefully, feeling as though I was receiving a message from beyond the grave. My dearest Kaylee, it began. If you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, but I hope these words bring you both clarity and comfort. Throughout your life, I've watched you strive for perfection, seeking approval that always seemed just out of reach. I've seen your light dimmed by the expectations placed upon you, and it has broken my heart. This money represents freedom, freedom to choose your own path, to make mistakes, to discover who you are outside of your parents' expectations. Use it to pursue your real dreams, not the ones chosen for you. I've watched Richard and Diana mold both you and Amber into extensions of themselves rather than nurturing your individual spirits. Amber escaped their influence, but at the cost of their support. You remained, always trying to earn love that should have been freely given. It's never too late to reclaim your life, my darling girl. Know that I have always been proud of you, not for your achievements, but for your kindness, your perseverance, and your beautiful heart. All my love, Grandma. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. My grandmother had seen everything, had recognized the toxic dynamics of our family, and had created this escape route for me years ago. Are you all right, Ms. Wilson? Caldwell asked gently, offering a box of tissues. I nodded, wiping my eyes. Did my parents know about this letter? No. Eleanor was very clear that it was for you alone. But they knew about the inheritance? Yes. I informed them immediately after Eleanor's passing, as they were handling the funeral arrangements. They said they would tell you once you'd had time to process the loss. His expression suggested he had doubted their intention even then. What happens now? I asked. Now we complete the paperwork to transfer the assets to your control. The process should take about 2 weeks. I would also recommend consulting with a financial advisor about investment options. As I left Caldwell's office, clutching a folder of documents and my grandmother's letter, I felt a strange mix of grief, gratitude, and determination. My grandmother's final gift wasn't just financial security, it was permission to break free from patterns that had constrained me my entire life. I hadn't planned to confront my parents immediately, but when my phone rang that evening and I saw my father's name on the caller ID, something inside me snapped. I answered before I could reconsider. I met with Thomas Caldwell today, I said without preamble. The silence on the other end was telling. Kaylee, my father finally said, his voice carefully controlled. We were planning to discuss that with you once you'd fully recovered. It's been 4 months since Grandma died, I replied. How much more recovered did I need to be? This hostility is unnecessary, he said stiffly. Financial matters are complex. We were waiting for the right time. The right time to tell me about a $250,000 inheritance specifically left to me? Or the right time to convince Caldwell to redirect those funds to the family trust you control? Another telling silence. He told you about that, my father finally said. Not a question, but a statement. Yes, he mentioned your multiple attempts to have the funds transferred to the family trust for my benefit. Fortunately, Grandma's will was explicitly clear about her wishes. Your grandmother didn't understand the complexities of wealth management, my father said dismissively. We were simply trying to protect you. Protect me? Or control me? This inheritance could ruin your work ethic, Kaylee. Sudden wealth often does. We've seen it happen countless times. The transparent manipulation might have worked a month ago. Now it just made me angry. Did you also try to protect Amber from her inheritance? I asked, already knowing the answer. Your sister has always been financially irresponsible, my father said. In her case, we had genuine concerns. Did Grandma include a letter with Amber's inheritance too? Another pause. I wouldn't know. But his tone told me he suspected such a letter existed, another truth they had tried to conceal. Why did you lie to me? I asked, cutting through the evasions. Why hide this for 4 months? My mother's voice suddenly joined the conversation. They were on speakerphone. We were concerned about the timing, darling. With your work pressure, then your episode, it didn't seem wise to add financial decisions to your plate. The convenient excuse might have sounded reasonable if I hadn't seen the pattern so clearly now. They had hidden the inheritance because it represented independence, the one thing they had systematically denied both their daughters. I've already signed the transfer documents, I said. The funds should be in my account within 2 weeks. This is a mistake, my father said, his voice hardening. That money should be managed as part of the family portfolio. We could challenge the will, you know. Argue that Eleanor wasn't of sound mind in her final years. The threat was so transparent, so desperate, that it almost made me laugh. Grandma was sharp until the end, and you know it. Besides, her lawyer has extensive notes documenting her wishes and her mental clarity. But go ahead and try if you want to publicly contest your own mother's will and expose our family drama to all your country club friends. I could almost see my father flinching at the thought of the social embarrassment that would cause. Let's not be hasty, my mother interjected smoothly. We all want what's best for Kaylee. Perhaps we could discuss this as a family, with financial advisors present. We know people who could help structure the inheritance advantageously. I'll be consulting my own financial advisors. Thank you, I replied. Kaylee, be reasonable, my father tried again. We've always managed the family finances. This confrontational attitude isn't like you. Maybe the real me is someone you've never bothered to know, I said quietly. After hanging up, I immediately called Amber. Did Grandma leave you an inheritance too? I asked without preamble. Yes, she confirmed. About $250,000. I received it a few months ago. I take it you just found out about yours. Today. They hid it from me, Amber. For 4 months. I'm not surprised, she said. They tried to convince Caldwell that I was financially irresponsible and the money should be protected in the family trust. When that didn't work, they tried guilt, said I was selfish for accepting my inheritance while abandoning the family. Did you get a letter from Grandma too? Yes, Amber's voice softened. She knew Kaylee. She saw everything. She set this up years ago, creating separate trusts for each of us that our parents couldn't touch. I thought about the bank statements Amber had shown me, the evidence of our parents' previous financial manipulations. Do you think they've been mismanaging other family funds? The trust accounts from our grandfather? The college funds? I've suspected it for years, Amber admitted. They've always lived beyond even Dad's considerable income. The country club membership, Mom's charity galas, the vacation home in the Hamptons. It all costs more than they should be able to afford. I think they've been dipping into every account they could access, including ours. The next day, I met with a financial advisor recommended by Caldwell, someone with no connection to my parents or their social circle. The picture that emerged confirmed our suspicions. My parents had borrowed repeatedly from various family accounts, including trust funds established by our grandfather. They had made risky investments that lost significant amounts. They had used family money to maintain their lavish lifestyle and social status. Their desperate attempt to get control of our inheritances wasn't just about maintaining control over their daughters. It was about accessing funds to cover financial holes they'd created over decades. Armed with this knowledge and the imminent financial independence my grandmother's inheritance would provide, I began making concrete plans. I would refinance my car immediately, removing my parents as co-signers. I would look for a new apartment when my lease ended, one my parents wouldn't have a key to. I would build professional relationships based on my own merit rather than my father's connections. The inheritance wasn't enough to live on indefinitely, but it was enough to provide security while I recalibrated my life and career. It was, as my grandmother had intended, freedom to make choices based on my own values rather than my parents' expectations. What I hadn't anticipated was how desperately my parents would fight to maintain their control, or how public the final confrontation would become. The annual Wilson Family Foundation Gala was the cornerstone of my parents' social calendar, a charity event they had founded 15 years earlier to support arts education in underprivileged schools. Every May, the elite of Greenwich gathered at the country club, wearing designer gowns and bespoke suits, to sip champagne, bid on auction items, and congratulate themselves on their philanthropy while my mother orchestrated every detail to perfection. In previous years, my attendance had been mandatory. I would fly back from college or take a day off work, don an appropriate gown, pre-approved by my mother, and circulate among guests, embodying the role of the successful, grateful daughter. The perfect reflection of Richard and Diana Wilson's exemplary parenting. This year's gala was scheduled for 3 weeks after my discovery of the inheritance. I had initially planned to skip it entirely, my first act of public independence. But after discussing the situation with Amber, I developed a different strategy. They'll use your absence against you, Amber pointed out during one of our now daily phone calls. They'll tell everyone you're unwell or going through a phase. They're masters at controlling the narrative. So, what's the alternative? Show up and pretend everything's normal. No, Amber said thoughtfully. Show up on your terms. Don't give them a chance to spin the story. Take control of the narrative yourself. The idea took root, growing stronger as I considered the possibility of confronting my parents in the setting they valued most, their carefully curated social world. When the formal invitation arrived in the mail, I texted my mother a brief, "I'll be there," without further elaboration. Her response was immediate and revealing. "Wonderful. Wear the blue Valentino. It photographs well and complements the decor. No, looking forward to seeing you," or "How are you feeling?" Just direction about how I should present myself to best enhance their event. Over the next 2 weeks, Amber and I planned carefully. I gathered evidence of our parents' manipulations, financial records, emails, text messages showing patterns of control and emotional manipulation. I connected with my grandmother's oldest friend, Margaret, who confirmed that Eleanor had seen through my parents' facade years ago and had structured her will specifically to give both Amber and me a path to independence. Most surprisingly, I found an unexpected ally in Bradford Collins, my father's former business partner who had been a fixture at family events throughout my childhood. I ran into him at a coffee shop near my office, and his genuine concern about my health led to a candid conversation. "I've known your parents for 30 years, Bradford said, his weathered face serious beneath silver hair. "I've watched how they've treated you girls. It wasn't right, Kaylee. I should have said something years ago. Why didn't you?" I asked, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. He sighed heavily. "I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere in how people raised their children. But the truth is, I was a coward. Your father can be vindictive when crossed, as I discovered when I questioned some of his financial decisions at the firm." Bradford agreed to attend the gala, his first since retiring 5 years earlier, and to support me if needed. "It's time someone stood up to Richard and Diana," he said. "I'm ashamed it wasn't me, but I'll damned well stand behind you when you do it." The night of the gala, Amber came to my apartment to help me prepare. Instead of the blue Valentino my mother had specified, I wore a striking red gown I'd purchased specifically for the occasion, a color my mother considered attention-seeking and had always discouraged me from wearing. "You look amazing," Amber said as I finished my makeup. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I admitted. "But also free? Like whatever happens tonight, I'm finally making my own choices." Amber, who hadn't attended the gala in years, wouldn't be coming with me. We agreed her presence might escalate tensions before I was ready. But she helped me rehearse what I wanted to say, reminding me to stay calm and focused regardless of how our parents responded. "Remember," she said as I prepared to leave, "they only have the power you give them. No matter what happens tonight, you get to decide what role they play in your life going forward." I arrived at the Greenwich Country Club 45 minutes after the gala's official start time, late enough to make an entrance, but not so late as to draw negative attention. The grand ballroom was decorated in my mother's signature understated elegance, white flowers, crystal accents, subtle lighting that flattered the predominantly older crowd. I spotted my parents immediately. My mother, resplendent in a navy gown that complemented the event's color scheme, was speaking animatedly with the mayor's wife. My father stood nearby, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a tumbler of scotch as he laughed at something the bank president was saying. Their expressions when they saw me were a study in conflicting emotions, initial relief that I had shown up, followed by dismay at my choice of dress, then quick recalibration as they remembered they had an audience. My mother reached me first, air-kissing my cheeks while whispering, "I specifically said the blue Valentino." "I decided red suited me better," I replied, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. My father joined us, placing a proprietary hand on my shoulder. "Kaylee, good of you to make it. The Hendersons were just asking about you. I told them you've been taking some time off to recuperate." "Recuperate?" I echoed. "Is that how you're describing it?" His grip on my shoulder tightened slightly. "Let's not discuss family matters here," he said, his smile never wavering. For the next hour, I circulated through the gala as expected, accepting concerned inquiries about my health with brief, non-committal responses. I noticed my mother watching me anxiously from across the room, clearly worried about what I might say to their friends and associates. The confrontation I had planned came after dinner, during the brief lull before the charity auction began. I found my parents near the bar, speaking with Bradford Collins, whose presence had clearly surprised them. Bradford was just telling us how unexpected it is to see him here after all these years, my father said as I approached, a slight edge to his jovial tone. Not as unexpected as discovering my grandmother left me a significant inheritance that you've been hiding from me for 4 months, I replied, keeping my voice level but clear. The surrounding conversations didn't quite stop, but they noticeably quieted. My father's smile became fixed, while my mother's eyes widened in alarm. "Kaylee, darling, this isn't the place," she began. "I think it's exactly the place," I interrupted. "You've spent my entire life training me to maintain appearances, to never air family business in public. It's the perfect way to ensure your behavior goes unchallenged." A small circle of space had cleared around us as nearby guests pretended not to listen while straining to hear every word. "You're clearly still emotional from your breakdown," my father said, loud enough for others to hear, attempting to establish the narrative of my instability. "I didn't have a breakdown," I stated clearly. "I collapsed from exhaustion after working 72 hours straight. The doctors called you, my emergency contacts, and you chose not to come to the hospital because you had this gala to attend." I could hear the murmurs from the surrounding guests. The annual gala was indeed important, but not visiting a hospitalized daughter? That crossed a line even in their social circle. "You're misrepresenting what happened," my mother said, her smile strained. "We checked with the doctors and made sure you were stable. The nurse who called you specifically said I should have family present," I countered. "You told her I was prone to dramatics." More murmurs. Bradford Collins stepped closer, a silent show of support. "This behavior is inappropriate," my father hissed, dropping all pretense of the jovial host. "You're embarrassing yourself and, more importantly, damaging the foundation's image. That's always been your primary concern, hasn't it? The image. Not my well-being, not my happiness. Just how I reflect on you." My mother tried a different approach, reaching for my hand with a concerned expression. "Kaylee, you're clearly still unwell. Perhaps we should call Dr. Winters." "I'm not unwell," I said, gently but firmly removing my hand from hers. "For the first time in my life, I'm seeing things clearly. I've spent 28 years trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I've sacrificed my health, my autonomy, and nearly my sanity trying to be the daughter you wanted instead of the person I am." "That's absurd," my father scoffed. "We've given you every advantage. Material advantages, yes. But love? Support? Acceptance? Those were always conditional on my performance, my achievements, my compliance with your expectations." The circle of observers had grown. I could see Margaret, my grandmother's friend, watching with tears in her eyes. Bradford stood solidly beside me. Even the mayor's wife was listening intently, her expression thoughtful. "Your grandmother's inheritance has clearly gone to your head," my father said, attempting to reassert control. "This is exactly why we felt those funds needed proper management." "You mean why you tried to redirect my inheritance to accounts you control?" "Just like you borrowed from my college fund and then charged me interest to pay back my own money." A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Financial impropriety was perhaps the only sin worse than poor parenting in their social circle. "That's a complete mischaracterization," my father snapped, but I could see uncertainty in the faces around us. The perfect facade was cracking. "Is it? I have the bank statements, Dad. I have the records of withdrawals from my trust funds that match exactly with the loans you supposedly gave me. I have evidence of every manipulation, every lie, every time you prioritized appearances over your daughter's well-being." Bradford cleared his throat. "She's telling the truth, Richard. I've seen the documentation." My father's face flushed with anger. "You're overstepping, Bradford. This is a family matter." "A family matter you've been discussing freely with everyone here," Bradford countered. "I've heard you telling people Kaylee had a mental breakdown 4 weeks now." Another ripple through the crowd. Another piece of the facade crumbling. "Kaylee has always been high-strung," my mother tried, addressing the onlookers directly now. "We've only ever wanted what's best for her." "What's best for me?" I echoed. "Or what makes you look best?" Because those have never been the same thing. My cousin Eliza, whom I hadn't even noticed in the crowd, suddenly spoke up. They did the same thing to Amber. I remember when she left home. Aunt Diana told everyone she was having emotional difficulties when really she just wanted to study art instead of business. The dam was breaking. Years of carefully maintained appearances were dissolving as people began to share their own observations of my parents' behavior. I've always thought it strange how Richard talked about his daughters like corporate assets, someone murmured. Remember when Kaylee got that fellowship to study in Paris, and Diana convinced her to turn it down for that internship at Richard's firm instead? My parents stood frozen, watching their social capital evaporate in real time. My father's face had gone from flushed to ashen, while my mother's perfect smile had disappeared entirely. I hadn't planned to create such a public scene, but now that it was happening, I felt an overwhelming sense of validation. These people, my parents' friends, associates, and peers, had seen the truth all along. They had just never spoken it aloud until now. We should continue this discussion privately, my father finally said, attempting to regain control of the situation. No, I said simply. I'm done with private discussions that allow the cycle to continue. I'm done pretending everything is fine when it isn't. I'm done sacrificing my well-being to maintain your image. I turned to address the gathered guests directly. I apologize for disrupting the gala. The foundation does good work, and the arts programs it supports are valuable. My issues with my parents don't change that. I looked back at my parents. I'll be leaving now. Please don't follow me or come to my apartment. I'll contact you when I'm ready to discuss what kind of relationship, if any, I want to have with you going forward. With that, I turned and walked toward the exit, my head high despite the tears threatening to spill. Bradford followed, offering to walk me to my car. Margaret hurried after us, enveloping me in a hug that smelled like my grandmother's perfume. Eleanor would be so proud of you, she whispered. She saw your strength even when you couldn't. Outside in the cool May evening, I took my first full breath in what felt like hours. My phone was already buzzing with messages from Amber, anxious to hear what had happened. As Bradford walked me to my car, he chuckled softly. I've been attending Richard and Diana's social functions for 3 decades, he said. That's the first real conversation I've ever witnessed. The description was so absurdly accurate that it startled a laugh from me despite the emotional turmoil. Years of perfectly orchestrated social interactions, carefully maintained facades, and strategic relationships, and it had taken just 15 minutes of honesty to crack the foundation of my parents' carefully constructed world. I drove away from the country club feeling lighter than I had in years, despite the uncertainty ahead. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth without filtering it through the lens of my parents' expectations. Whatever happened next would be on my terms, not theirs. 6 months after the gala confrontation, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, morning sunlight streaming through windows unobstructed by neighboring high-rises. I'd moved from my sterile Manhattan apartment to a character-filled brownstone in Brooklyn, trading proximity to the office for a space that actually felt like home. The walls, once gallery white, now displayed colorful artwork, some purchased from local artists, some created by Amber, and one special piece painted by my grandmother years ago that I'd rediscovered in storage. Mismatched furniture chosen for comfort rather than aesthetic coherence filled the living room. Plants thrived on every windowsill, their care a grounding daily ritual I'd come to cherish. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder, meeting with Jessie, 10 a.m. Jessie Chin was my newest client at the boutique marketing agency I joined 3 months earlier after resigning from my previous position. The smaller firm focused on nonprofits and socially responsible businesses, with a commitment to work-life balance that would have seemed ludicrous to my former self. I worked 40 hours a week instead of 80, for somewhat less pay but immeasurably greater satisfaction. Part of my inheritance had gone toward launching a side business I'd dreamed about for years, but never pursued, a digital platform connecting small arts organizations with marketing professionals willing to provide pro bono or reduced-rate services. It wasn't profitable yet, but it was growing steadily, fueled by my genuine passion rather than external expectations. Amber had moved from Philadelphia to New Jersey 2 months ago, close enough for weekly visits, but far enough to maintain our independent lives. Our relationship had deepened into a friendship I treasured, built on mutual respect and shared understanding of our unusual childhood. She had recently started dating someone new, a kind-hearted teacher who made her laugh, something I'd rarely seen during our formative years. My relationship with our parents had shifted into something I carefully managed rather than endured. After the gala, they had made multiple attempts to regain control, first through angry calls and texts demanding I fix the damage I'd caused to their reputation, then through flying monkeys in the form of family friends urging reconciliation, and finally through tearful appeals from my mother about family loyalty. When those approaches failed, they'd shown up unannounced at my old apartment, fortunately after I'd moved, sent expensive gifts with manipulative notes attached, and even attempted to contact my new employer under the guise of concern about my workload. Each attempt had been met with the same clear, calm response. I would engage with them only on my terms, with boundaries firmly in place. I had drafted a letter outlining those boundaries: limited contact, no unannounced visits, no interference in my career or finances, and mandatory acknowledgement of past harmful behavior before any deeper relationship could be rebuilt. Many family members had reached out after the gala, some to offer support, others to express shock at revelations that contradicted the perfect family image my parents had projected for decades. Cousins I'd barely known growing up became unexpected allies. Aunts and uncles divided into camps, those who had always seen through my parents' facade and those who still believed their narrative of having an ungrateful, emotionally unstable daughter. The social consequences for my parents had been significant. Several charity boards had quietly asked my mother to step down. My father's invitations to exclusive golf foursomes had dwindled. The perfect image they had spent decades cultivating had been irreparably tarnished. Part of me felt guilty about this fallout. They were still my parents, after all, and causing them pain had never been my goal. But as my therapist, Dr. Mara, decidedly not my parents' friend Dr. Winters, helped me understand, I wasn't responsible for the natural consequences of exposing unhealthy behavior. I hadn't destroyed their social standing. Their own actions had done that once brought to light. The therapy journey had been both challenging and transformative. Weekly sessions with Dr. Mara helped me process the complex emotions around my childhood, my collapse, and the subsequent confrontations. I learned to recognize patterns of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and external validation seeking that had dominated my life. Most importantly, I learned to identify my own wants and needs, something that had been systematically discouraged throughout my formative years. My physical health had improved dramatically with proper rest, nutrition, and stress management. The heart palpitations and migraines that had once been constant companions now rarely occurred. I slept through the night without anxiety dreams about missed deadlines or disappointing presentations. I had built a circle of friends who knew the real me, not the achievement-oriented perfectionist my parents had created, but the person emerging from beneath those expectations. Some were former colleagues who had reached out after my departure from the agency. Others were new connections made through classes and activities I'd never had time for previously: a weekly pottery workshop, a hiking group, a book club focused on memoirs. Together, these people formed the chosen family that provided the unconditional support my biological family never had. We celebrated birthdays and achievements, supported each other through difficulties, and enjoyed simple pleasures like home-cooked dinners and movie nights without the constant undercurrent of evaluation and judgment that had characterized my family gatherings. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Amber stood on my doorstep, holding a small gift bag and wearing a broad smile. "Happy actual birthday," she announced, stepping inside to hug me tightly. Today marked my first birthday celebrated on the actual date, rather than on the weekend most convenient for my parents' schedule and suitable for maximizing social impact. Growing up, my birthdays had always been carefully orchestrated events designed to showcase my achievements and my parents' exceptional parenting rather than to celebrate my existence. "I can't believe you came all this way on a weekday morning," I said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "And miss your first parents' free birthday?" "Not a chance." She handed me the gift bag. "This isn't your main present. That's for dinner tonight. This is just a little something I found that I thought you should have." Inside the bag was a small, worn leather-bound journal. I recognized it immediately as our grandmother's diary. "Where did you find this?" I asked, carefully opening the fragile cover. "In that box of books Margaret gave me after the estate was settled. I only just discovered it was there." Amber pointed to an entry dated about 5 years earlier. "Read this part." The neat, familiar handwriting brought an immediate lump to my throat. "Spoke with Thomas, lawyer, today about establishing separate trusts for the girls. Richard will be furious when he discovers I've bypassed him, but I've watched him control my granddaughters through financial manipulation for too long. Amber has escaped physically but still bears the emotional scars. Kaylee remains enmeshed in their toxic expectations, trying so hard to earn love that should be freely given. I may not live to see Kaylee break free as Amber has done, but I can provide the means for her independence when she's ready to claim it. The money isn't the point, it's the choice it represents. The freedom to decide who she wants to be without Richard and Diana's influence hanging over every decision. I see her true self beneath the perfect facade, her compassion, her creativity, her genuine desire to help others rather than simply impress them. Someday, I hope she'll see it too." Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. My grandmother had created my escape route years before I'd been ready to acknowledge I needed one. She had seen me, the real me, when I had been too busy performing to know myself. "She knew," I whispered. "She understood everything." "She did," Amber agreed, her own eyes damp. "And she'd be so proud of who you're becoming now." That evening, we celebrated my birthday with a small gathering at my apartment, just Amber, her new boyfriend Mike, my closest friend from the new agency, and 2 friends from my pottery class. We ate takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, drank wine, and shared stories without a formal seating arrangement or my mother's carefully chosen centerpieces. As I looked around at these people who valued me for myself rather than my achievements or family connection, I felt a sense of peace I had never experienced at the elaborate birthday celebrations of my past. Later,